Hey guys, today I'll be taking a look at the state of the 2022 Senate elections as we enter the month of September. This map is looking more and more favorable to the Democrats as the Republicans are having a worse and worse time in trying to win back the majority in the upper chamber that they lost in 2020. This map looked like a very winnable map for the Republican Party just a couple of months ago, but their odds have been decreasing steadily as their candidates are not proving to be the electable candidates that they thought they would be. So looking at the current makeup of the Senate, it is 50-50. So the Republican Party only lost the Senate 2 years ago, and they held it in every single election going all the way back to 2014. So there was a 6-year streak of Republican control of the U.S. Senate, but that ended, of course, in 2020, and now it seems more and more unlikely the Republicans are going to win that majority back. Looking at the generic ballot numbers, Democrats are now ahead by 0.9%. We saw that a month ago, the Republican Party lost their lead that they held since all the way back in November of last year. And now, even though Democrats are leading by 0.9%, this is nothing compared to the advantage that they had in 2020 or the advantage that they had all the way back in 2018. 2 years ago, Democrats were up 7.3% on Election Day, and back in 2018, Democrats led by 8.6%. Now, with the House elections, Democrats are very likely to lose. However, in the Senate, Democrats have a much better chance. This map is more beneficial for the Democratic Party than the other two maps that we saw. If you look at the 2018 map, yes, Democrats did very well. It was considered a blue wave, but they were still not able to win the Senate and actually lost a seat in the state of Florida, with Rick Scott defeating Bill Nelson. However, if you just look at the seats that Democrats had to defend in 2018, you will see why Democrats did so poorly compared to the House. Democrats lost in North Dakota, Missouri, and Indiana. All three of these states had Democratic incumbents. If you look at the map here, these were all flips for the GOP. I mean, pretty easy flips. All states Trump won by solid margins in 2016. And then, of course, Democrats actually maintained their seats in states like Ohio, West Virginia, and even Montana. So 2018, it was not a bad year for Democrats overall, but the map simply made it so that they were unable to win back the Senate. However, in 2020, the states that they were able to defend were much easier to defend. If you look at the races that we had 2 years ago, Democrats really did not have to defend that many seats and were able to make wins in states like Georgia and Arizona, giving them the majority. And now if we move on to this year, 2022, you see that the states that Democrats have to defend are seats that they already control, as they currently hold the majority. Democrats have incumbents in Colorado, Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, and New Hampshire. All 5 of these races are winnable races for the Democrats and all states that voted for Joe Biden in the 2020 presidential election. We also have 2 other states that Joe Biden won, Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, with Senate seats currently controlled by Republicans. And so this map makes it so that the races this year are going to be very competitive. I said earlier that the map is looking worse and worse for the Republicans because this really was a winnable map. Yes, Joe Biden did win many of these states, but in states like Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Arizona, the margins were just a little bit over or under 1%. But as the national environment continues to favor the Democrats, it will become more and more difficult for Republican candidates to sell their policies, and so right now that is why this map is still going to be very competitive, but looking up for the Democrats. Joe Biden's approval rating is also increasing by the day. He currently has a 42.4% approval rating and a 53.1% disapproval rating, which means that Joe Biden is around at net negative 11% in terms of his overall approval. And so if we do look at his numbers here, they are the best they've been in almost 4 months. And Joe Biden's numbers going up, it's definitely providing a needed boost to Democratic Party voters. He is energizing the base, and of course his new student loan forgiveness, as well as just the other new policies that he's been able to make into law, has been able to boost the Democratic Party's chances overall. If you compare Biden now to former presidents, Joe Biden at this point in time in his presidency is more popular than Donald Trump, very close to Barack Obama, also on par with the approval ratings of both Bill Clinton and Ronald Reagan at this point in their presidencies. And of course, Barack Obama and Bill Clinton were all able to hold on to their majorities in the Senate, Donald Trump as well, and of course with George W. Bush, but he also had a much higher approval. So looking at Joe Biden's numbers right now, it should not be something that the administration is happy about, but definitely we are seeing a significant improvement, and that is also something coinciding with the national generic ballot numbers. The performance of the president really is very important in these midterms. That's why every single midterm we always see a wave for the party that's not in the White House, as we typically see, just because of the fact that presidents are almost always not approved of, at least in modern history. If you look at the last couple of presidents, I mean, just look at the 8-year linear graphs. They have gotten pretty bad at some points for many presidents. Even Barack Obama at one point had a 40% approval rating. Donald Trump's was pretty low for the entirety of his tenure. And of course, George W. Bush's presidency just got worse and worse after 9/11 occurred. And at this point, even the general populace does not have confidence in the GOP's chances at winning back control. They only have a 40% chance at winning the Senate according to the betting markets. This is where people put their money. And if you look at the overall trend, Republicans have been leading for almost a year now, if you can go back more than just 90 days. But at the very beginning of June, the GOP had a 78% chance at winning the Senate, and now they only have a 40% chance. So definitely things have changed drastically. And yes, 60-40 does not really mean too much statistically. The GOP still has a very good chance. But I mean, honestly, you just have to look at this significant shift here to see that the numbers for the GOP are getting worse and worse, and they're really not in the strong position that they were in just a couple of months ago. And according to 538, the odds for the Senate control are also much better for Democrats as well. We see a pretty similar trend. A month ago, at the very end of July, Democrats took the lead, and right now, Democrats are actually expected to win 51 seats on average, which is a pretty big deal, because this means that 530 actually does believe that the Democratic Party is going to expand upon the majority that they currently hold. And so right now, Democrats have a 2-3 chance at winning control once again, according to the 538 forecast. And so far in this video, we've looked at many different ways to predict these midterms, but now we're going to take a look at the one factor that probably favors Democrats the most, and these are the polls. We have basically tons of new polls coming out every single day. New polls just today from Colorado, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania, all showing Democrats ahead. In Indiana, Todd Young leads by 3%. We also have new numbers from Georgia. Admittedly, the numbers are going up for Republicans here. Herschel Walker is seeing an increase in support. We also have new polls from Ohio and Arizona, both showing Democrats ahead. And basically, new polls are being released on a daily basis now as we enter the final 2-month push until the midterms. So looking at our map, we essentially have 10 toss-up races this year. These races were all pretty competitive in the 2020 presidential election and are going to be competitive this year as well. If we look at the other remaining seats, they're pretty much going to go to the parties that I've set them as. There's no way the Democrats are going to win in states like Iowa, Indiana, or Missouri, and Republicans don't stand a chance in states like Oregon, Washington, or New York. So looking at these 10 remaining races, I mean, it should be a very competitive election, but Democrats do have a slight edge with the incumbents that they have. So starting off with North Carolina, according to the polls, this is the most competitive race that we have. Republicans lead by 0.2%. Ted Budd, the Republican nominee in North Carolina, a state that's not voted for Democrats on the presidential level since 2008, and before that, 1976, the Republican candidate here has a 0.2% lead over Sherry Beasley. Sherry Beasley, Ted Budd, both not spectacular candidates, pretty status quo for both parties. So I think that we should see definitely win for the GOP. The polling numbers are pretty abysmal for them here, but North Carolina is going to be a tilt Republican state based on the polls alone. In the state of Ohio, we see the Democrats lead by 0.6%. Tim Ryan is up by a very small margin, mainly because of the fact that he had a very good summer, leading in basically every single poll from the months of June until August. And so these polls were not exactly the best. Many of them were Democratic funded, and many of them were also online SurveyMonkey polls. But if we do look at the two most recent polls from A- rated pollsters, the Trafalgar Group and Emerson College, Vance does lead by 5 and 3%. But Trafalgar, having Vance up by 5, it really is not good. And we're going to be taking a look at all of the Trafalgar polls in just a couple of moments, just to show you just how skewed the map is currently for the Democrats. Tim Ryan's most recent poll shows Tim Ryan leading by 3%, and so that's why Democrats still maintain a very small lead according to the polls in Ohio. So Ohio is going to be tilt for the Democratic Party. In Georgia, we see that Raphael Warnock leads by 1.7% against Herschel Walker. The three most recent polls have actually shown Walker leading by just a very small margin. However, this race is still very much within the margin of error. I think Nevada and Georgia are going to be the two closest races that we have this year. Warnock was doing pretty well in the summer, but things have started to change just a little bit. Herschel Walker is by no means a good candidate. If he was a good candidate, he would have been winning by a much larger margin. I mean, Georgia should be a state that's polling significantly in favor of the Republican Party. Just look at the governor's race. Brian Kemp leads by 5% against Stacey Abrams. And Stacey Abrams is a powerhouse in Georgia Democratic politics. She helped Joe Biden, Don Ossoff, and Raphael Warnock win their races in 2020 and 2021. So Warnock up by 1.7% is a big deal, especially considering the fact that polls in Georgia have been very accurate. So Georgia is going to be a lean Democratic state, and in Florida, Republicans are not doing as well as they hope to be. Rubio seemed to be almost untouchable a couple of months ago, but according to the polls right now, he only leads by an average of 2.7%. Florida is always going to be a competitive race, at least in the next couple of elections. I do expect things to become easier for the GOP in the next decade or so, but Mark Rubio right now leading by 2.7% is not a good sign. The most recent polls show a pretty close race. There were even many polls showing an even race, and a poll from the AB-rated University of North Florida had Val Demings leading by 4. However, the most recent polls do show Rubio leading. So Florida is still going to be a lean Democratic state according to the polls, but I can definitely see Mark Rubio winning by a margin of over 5%. So Florida is going to be lean for the Republicans and Georgia for the Democrats. Next up, in Nevada, Catherine Cortez Masto leads by 3.7% against Adam Laxalt. In my opinion, Nevada is going to be the most competitive election, and the election that decides the fate of the upper chamber for the next 2 years. I think if Masto loses, Democrats' odds go down significantly. If Masto wins, the odds go up significantly for the Democrats. Of course, it also matters what happens in states like Pennsylvania and Georgia, but I think that if Democrats can win in Nevada, they can win the Senate majority. So Nevada right now is going to be a lean Democratic state, and in Arizona, we see a race that's even more favorable for the Democratic Party, in which Mark Kelly leads by 7.8%. At this point in time, I would say that it's almost impossible for the GOP to win. Polls in Arizona are not known for being that favorable towards the Democrats. They, of course, have overestimated Democratic Party candidates, especially in 2020 with Mark Kelly and Joe Biden. But if Blake Masters is not even going to lead in a single poll, and I mean, these are big polling numbers for Mark Kelly, Blake Masters really does not stand a chance. I mean, right now the numbers are just so heavily in favor of Mark Kelly. Even the most right-wing pollster in the country, the Trafalgar Group, has Kelly leading by 3%. So at this point, Arizona is almost a lock for the Democratic Party, with Mark Kelly winning his first 6-year term. So Arizona is actually going to be a likely state on our map, as of course Kelly is up by 8 percentage points. In Pennsylvania, this is a seat currently held by Republicans. I mean, if Pennsylvania goes blue, it would be a flip for the Democratic Party, and John Fetterman is the party's nominee. He leads by 8.1% on average against Mehmet Oz. We see a pretty similar story here that we see in Arizona. Every single poll has shown John Fetterman leading, and by pretty significant margins. The most recent Trafalgar poll has Fetterman up by 5. So Pennsylvania is also going to be a likely Democratic state on our map. And so these are all the states that we have polling averages in, and at this point, Democrats are already at 50. Now, we also have 3 more races in Colorado, Wisconsin, and New Hampshire. In Colorado, Democrats lead by around 10% according to the average led in every single poll. Of course, Colorado is going to be a blue state. And in Wisconsin, we're actually seeing a very interesting story developing where Mandela Barnes actually stands a chance. Ron Johnson is more vulnerable than we thought. Even the most recent Trafalgar poll has Mandela Barnes leading by 2%. So right now, according to the polls, Wisconsin is going to be lean for the Democratic Party. And of course, Democrats are going to win in New Hampshire. I mean, it would be almost impossible for them to win these races and not in New Hampshire. We do not know who the Republican nominee is going to be in this race. That's why I'm not going to fill in this state, but I do think New Hampshire is going to be lean for the Democratic Party. So this map is not my prediction, obviously. I do not think Democrats are going to win anywhere near 53 states, but this is simply what the data is telling us. This map is looking very favorable for the Democrats right now, and with the 10 toss-up races that we had, Republicans are only ahead in 2 of them, North Carolina by 0.2% and Florida by less than 3%. And so, of course, I'm going to see in the comments of this video that people are going to say that the polling numbers are almost always skewed in favor of Democrats, that these are all liberal pollsters, and that 538 is somehow a Democratic operative. So if we do look at these polling numbers, yes, I think that the numbers are biased in favor of the Democratic Party. I think there's no doubt about that. Democrats are almost always overestimated in the Midwest, slightly in the Sun Belt, but in states like Georgia, as well as Nevada and Colorado, the polls are relatively accurate. for Arizona as well. They're not really off by too much. And so instead of looking at the big picture, instead of looking at all the polls averaged out, we're going to take a look at only the most right-wing pollsters. And of course, these are polls conducted by the Trafalgar Group. The Trafalgar Group is the most well-known right-wing pollster in the country, and basically Donald Trump's favorite pollster. They gave Trump the highest approval out of any other pollster, and every single time the Trafalgar Group's numbers are almost always biased towards the Republican candidate. So if we do look at Trafalgar polls, things are not looking good for Republicans either. Right now, Herschel Walker leads by 1% in Georgia. I mean, you could spin this as a positive result for Republicans, but I mean, if the Trafalgar Group has a Republican candidate winning by 1%, they're almost always guaranteed to lose. So Georgia right now, according to the most right-wing pollster, is only going to be a tilt Republican state. Now, moving on to Arizona and Wisconsin, Democrats are favored in both of these races, according to the Trafalgar Group. Kelly is expected to win his first full 6-year term against Mark Blake Masters by 3%, and Mandela Barnes is expected to flip Wisconsin by 2% against Ron Johnson. So both of these states are going to be lean for the Democratic Party according to these right-wing polls, and so that's going to give Democrats now 47 seats. Moving down the list further, Democrats are winning by 6% in Colorado with Michael Bennet in his race against Joe Dea. So Colorado is going to be likely blue. And then we also had 3 new polls released on the 18th of August. J.D. Vance leads by 5% against Tim Ryan in Ohio. We saw this earlier. John Fetterman up by 5 against Mehmet Oz in Pennsylvania, and Adam Laxalt leads by 2% against Catherine Cortez Masto in Nevada. So Nevada is going to be a flip for the GOP according to this poll. Now, Adam Laxalt, I think, leading by 2% is not that big of a deal. Again, Nevada, in my opinion, is going to be the closest race, and if Trafalgar has a Republican candidate up by 2, that race is going to be very, very close. So Nevada right now is going to be lean for the Republicans. Ohio is going to be likely, and Pennsylvania is going to be likely blue. And then finally, in the state of North Carolina, we see Ted Budd up by 3%. This poll was conducted at the beginning of July, so almost 2 months ago. Ted Budd led by 3% against Terry Beasley, so that's going to make North Carolina a lean Republican state. And so this is the 2022 Senate map based on the Trafalgar Group's most recent Senate polls. And so in Florida and New Hampshire, I'm going to give both of these states to the party that's going to win, obviously. So Florida, it's going to be a likely Republican state, and New Hampshire, I have it as a lean Democratic. So 50-50 Senate, according to the most recent Trafalgar polls in the most important key races. So even if you look at polls from the most right-wing pollster, you will see that Democrats are expected to win control. Now, they're obviously not going to expand upon their majority, but with their win in Arizona as well as flips in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, Democrats are going to hold on to the upper chamber with a very slight majority. Now, I do not believe this is going to happen. I think Trafalgar is going to be pretty wrong in many of these races. Obviously, Wisconsin is not going to flip blue if Democrats can't hold on to Nevada and Georgia, but this just goes to show you, no matter how you look at the data, even if you look at the most right-wing polls, things are looking up for the Democratic Party. This, again, is the map based on the averages of all of the pollsters that have conducted polls in these competitive races, and they give Democrats 53 seats overall. So although Democrats are probably going to lose the House, the Senate is still very much within their reach as Joe Biden becomes a more popular president overall, with his approval going up, and of course the popularity of Democrats going up nationwide as well. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure you like it down below if you enjoyed it. Comment down below which party you think is going to win the majority in the Senate, and whether or not you believe the latest polls that we're seeing, and how do you feel about the Trafalgar Group showing Democrats winning 50 seats after November. Like this video if you enjoyed it. Again, subscribe to my channel if you haven't, and I will see you guys in the next video.